Hello, and welcome to the Mohit Show. In this video I will be covering stories from r/detrans, a well-moderated subreddit for people questioning, desisting, or detransitioning. I will be protecting the identities of these posters since individuals in this community have been harassed when their stories have been discussed. A text-to-speech voice is being used due to current recording difficulties. This video's first post, titled, "My Dad Wishes for a Son," desisted female. My dad, who specifically said he only wanted daughters when I asked him if he was disappointed, we were all girls, has started lamenting his lack of a son. I straight up told him, find me a babysitter and I can do anything a boy would have done because my stepfather made it clear an ugly tomboyish stepdaughter was the same as a boy. Woman shrugging. Medium skin tone. Dad has a lot of home improvement work to do, and he wants help. After all the gender s I went through, I need a son was the last effing thing I needed to hear. My dad knows nothing about the gender s. I guarantee you I'm the toughest bitch he ever met, and he has no idea. It is not helpful when he has an incredibly independent daughter who kills her own snakes. Just wanted to vent where people who might understand would listen, I guess. From the comments. Detrans male. I'm sorry but it isn't the same. Yes, women can do many of the things men can do. But men and women are not their interests, and some of the camaraderie we crave with a same-sex child cannot be recreated. You cannot relate to his struggles in puberty or as a male-bodied person. He can never pass down the sex-based knowledge he accrued. It's okay to mourn that. Detrans female. I don't agree with the other comment here and I get where you're coming from. I honestly think it's weird to mourn not having a kid because of what genitals you were born with. You're right, you're just as capable and can bond in the same ways that a son and father typically could. I have no idea what experiences other people have, but Lord knows having a period or getting boobs did not make me have a special bond with my mom. LOL. It's sexism plain and simple, and also strange to value having a boy instead of a girl, and especially to express that to you, his kid. It's clear he's not meaning so they could talk about puberty together. Next post, titled, "Need some perspective." Desisted female. I woke up very recently. I'm not a transsexual, I'm a girl that likes girls. This was a slow realization, but now I'm feeling the grief and regret of having lived as the wrong thing for almost 4 years, all throughout high school. I know I have so much life and potential ahead of me, but I can't help but feel so angry about the time I wasted on gender ideology instead of self-improvement and self-care at a time when my mental health was absolutely trash. I never needed to be a man to like girls. I also hurt people I care about. Even without hormones or surgery, the mistake feels like it's going to linger for the rest of my life. I need some help as I mend the relationships in my life and keep moving forward. I am looking for some optimism from this community. I'm only 18, it's going to be okay. Right? From the comments. Detrans female. Hi there, I feel like we may have gone through a similar experience and can give you some insight with moving forward. I socially transitioned when I was 14 and all throughout high school I was identifying as male. Nobody knew the name I was born with, and some never knew I was AFAB. I had a lot of friends within the community. My mom was extremely supportive and had a huge influence on the LGBT community, was an out and proud lesbian who took my sister and I to gay rights and pride events since before we turned 10 and has a heavy presence on social media. My dad disowned me, and I did the same to him. He wasn't in my life much in my teen years, especially when he kicked me out to live with my mom. We had a very poor relationship, or none at all. At 17 I changed my name and started testosterone. Of course, my mom would post everything to social media about me and my transition. At 18 I stopped taking testosterone and kind of told everyone I was non-binary, including my mom. She seemed stressed out but still supportive. I was stressed out about how everyone would see me. Started dressing feminine again. Went by a gender-neutral name. 19 I was homeless, and in some of the depression I experienced I told my sister I wanted a father. She told me I do and told him to call me. We had a long conversation, mainly him telling me I've always been strong even when I was struggling, and I always pulled through. He gave me a pep talk. I also brought up I wanted to be called by my birth name again. He asked if my mom or sister knew. I said no, and he said that's okay because I can tell them when I'm ready and that people who love me for who I am won't care. What's in a name? He told me a lot that I needed to hear. Told my sister, she was completely okay with it and just felt like how she did when I wanted to be called a boy's name for the first time. She supported me and just needed to get used to it again. I could understand now because before I had no tolerance for getting used to it. She also kept it secret from my mom. At 21, just a few months ago I called my mom to help me with my past addresses on my paperwork to petition for name change. Later she called and asked if I was changing it to that gender-neutral name and I said no, I'm restoring a formal legal name because I felt disconnected from my roots and that name was a huge part of my identity. She got mad. She literally asked, what am I going to tell everyone? What am I going to tell all my friends? I started crying and asked her if she could just love me and accept me for who I am, no matter what. We still have a decent relationship, but I knew she was grieving a son. Throughout my detransition, whenever I reconnected with people who knew me as a trans guy, I found that there were some people who thought less of me but a lot of people who were happy for me for finding myself. I remembered my dad telling me people who love and care about me won't care. I found out who was really on my side versus who had their own agenda. That gave me peace of mind. My voice lightened, but I still had gotten deeper than what it was pre-T. Vocal exercises helped my voice lighten up a lot within the first couple months of me coming off of T. My breasts were destroyed from binding for so many years, but they also grew a little even if they aren't perky anymore. I gained a lot of weight when I stopped taking it. My facial and body hair lightened and or thinned, but it was still there. I was self-conscious about my bottom growth. I was very self-conscious about everything. Sometimes I still get stressed knowing I need to cough up money to get laser hair removal, voice feminization surgery, and breast augmentation surgery, no implants, just a lift. But I also know that nobody really cares. Nobody is looking at my boobs and thinking that I wore a binder. Nobody is going to hear my voice and think I'm a man, it's in the androgynous range, they just look at me as a tomboy. And definitely nobody is looking at my clit except for my boyfriend of 3.5 years, who I met when I just detransitioned. He loves it and apparently there's a community of people into that kind of thing. If it exists, there will always be people who approve. My facial hair? I shave what's left of it now and my shadow has lightened a lot. Even before it lightened, I'd use makeup to hide it. P.S. Flawless is a brand that makes a facial razor for women, and it doesn't grow back darker. But even if I had the world knowing what I've been through or thinking I was AMAB, so what? I know who I am. I'm comfortable with my identity now. I know who is really there for me and who isn't. And that's something really important to figure out in time when detransitioning. You know who you are. That's a huge deal, and if nobody's told you yet, I'm proud of you for being yourself. You can choose who you invite back into your life and who you reconnect with, and you can choose who you don't need in your life. Has a family member you haven't talked to in years? Tell them you need them, and you need to talk to them. Life is too short and too precious to hold on to people you don't need or keep people you do need out of your life. Do what's healthy for your mental and social health and forget everything and everyone else. Detrans male, you are correct that you have your whole life ahead of you. Some of us are starting over well into our late 20s, 30s, 40s, and beyond. It's okay and healthy to grieve, but in the long run whatever you did in high school becomes irrelevant. Next post, titled, Imagine you had never been exposed to content glorifying and hyping up the transgender phenomenon. Would you have still wanted to transition? Desisted female, would you have been just a tomboy, or would you still have tried becoming a boy? Would you have identified your dysphoric feelings as a sign of needing to transition, or would you have more quickly understood them as signs of what they really are, trauma, neurodivergence, low self-esteem, etc.? Would you have tried becoming happy in your body? From the comments. Detrans female, I wasn't exposed to the online stuff, it was the adults in my life that had me question my gender, when I was 13. Detrans, who remembers watching FTM progress videos by YouTuber Skyla? Desisted female, I definitely wouldn't have. Most of my dysphoria came from the objectification and hypersexualization of women. It led me to be disgusted by my body. I was also exploring my attraction to girls, so both these things led me to adopting a very masculine style and attitude. I only hung out with guys and tried so hard to be one and earn their respect. And that's why an ex-GF and her friend group decided I was trans and were extremely insistent about my gender ID. They'd send me links to Tumblr posts and show me genders they thought I was. And eventually I thought it made sense, because the descriptions matched how I felt. Luckily my dysphoria subsided really quickly, after I became more comfortable with my sexuality. But without the trans fats I wouldn't have blown my discomfort out of proportion. In retrospective it was very normal, and the only reason I felt different is because I was singled out by people who claimed my feelings meant I needed medical intervention. Detrans female yes, the moment I fully started to take actual steps towards my transition it wasn't because of any hype or some kind of phenomenon. I had realized something that I had been repressing for some years. I'm still not completely sure of anything. I had always felt different in a multitude of certain ways, especially concerning my gender. But I'm trying to follow my gut right now and trying to focus not as much on fulfilling some expectations of traditional gender in society. I didn't feel like I would ever be a real man, though I still want a masculine body and features, I just want to not be forced into a box by anyone. So, I've technically started to detransition, but I don't regret it at all even with my more masculine features. I feel like they've given me a bit more realization to who I am and that I shouldn't deny it. I'm trying to see if I can accept myself how I was born. Desisted male honestly, I probably would have never got the idea I could be anything other than a guy if I never knew what being trans was. I think part of my trans thoughts also has to do with wanting to fit in and receive positive attention in spaces I frequent/progressive circles. Desisted for men, except for the AGP guys it's often wanting to escape your current life and get laid, ALA transmaxing. So, I actually tried to either get testosterone and become more male or become a male lesbian like the transmaxers. However, without the trans ideology, I was never confused that I wasn't happy in my body. I thought my life sucked because my body wasn't male enough, or maybe supposed to be female. With all the trans ideology nowadays, I think a lot of kids ignore that first my life sucks instinct, and instead thinks it must be dysphoria that is the bad feeling they feel. What I've started to realize later is I'm super lucky Sweden didn't have a trans pipeline when I was younger, and that status is very important for male sexual success but can be achieved in many different ways. Some people found my love for dance super effeminate, but it did get me several sexual partners at the time, and finally my fiancé, smiley face. 3. For men that part is often important, but I think women more often want to escape what they find a scary proposition of sex with men instead, becoming a fictional yaoi male rather than an actual male. Of course, it doesn't work out because no woman achieves that impossible ideal, and neither do they usually want to date trans men either. So, it's really just the medical companies and medical professionals that benefit. Detrans male I wasn't exposed to any content glorifying or hyping up transitioning until well after I started wishing I could be the opposite sex. I felt a desire to be a woman since I was about 3 or 4. I didn't know what being trans was until about a decade later. Desisted female no. Flat out no. And that's why I'm so mad about it. Desisted female I would never have identified as trans if I hadn't. I would still have crippling dysphoria, but without the dangerous mentality that I could just change my body to fit my mental illness. Desisted if I was struggling with my gender in today's day and age, I may have tried to transition. I had entertained the idea in my late teens and tried passing several times. I came to understand my internal misogyny, and that I feared sexual attention from males due to SA history. I also became accepting of my masculine values which stemmed from being raised by only a male, and with brothers, maybe a bit of autism, diagnosed ad. I'm happy that I became accepting of my gender and comfortable with my body. If I was exposed to the egg culture before I reached that level of acceptance, I may have considered myself trans. Detrans female no, probably not. It's hard to envision doing something that hasn't been done before, or that has overwhelming stigma attached to it. Desisted female would I have transitioned? Maybe, maybe not. Would I have still wanted to transition? No doubt in my mind. I was 4 years old when I first had a notion of wanting to be a boy, and I had no idea what a transsexual was. Like I wanted to magically wake up one day, as a boy version of myself, and everyone sees me as a boy and treats me as a boy, and magically no one acts as if anything had been different. Oh, and I would have a penis. I know some kids, most of whom probably really are trans, insist I am a boy at 4 and ask their parents to call them a boy nickname, and wear boy clothing, and pursue interests that are more common and socially accepted for boys. So, for me it wasn't like that. It was like I want to be one, which I knew was impossible, rather than I identify as one. I think this fantasy of mine, this coping mechanism, and also ideation when I was older that I really might be FTM trans, like the reason I felt awful to begin with was because my early childhood was really sad and stressful. My mother, mostly, screwed me up. It's something really deeply ingrained in me. Like after a certain age, there was no influence that was going to come along that could make me not have an anxious personality. Nor could it make the fantasy of being the opposite gender not appealing. If that makes sense. To this very day even I enjoy the fantasy of being the opposite gender and like okay, if I could improve my appearance in any way, I'd rather be a hotter female, but there is still something that would be emotionally gratifying about having a male body and interacting with the world as a male. I am cisgender female, like medically unambiguously female, but I bear a truly uncanny resemblance to a man. It's not some sort of body dysmorphia, other people think this as well about me. That has a pretty big effect on what kind of a life I'm going to have. It's not just this non-factor. Sure, I can do everything else an average-looking person does, but it has an effect. If Tumblr had come along in my formative years, rather than when I was in my 20s when I discovered it, I'm sure it would have changed me. I have no doubt in my mind, it could have profoundly changed me. Possibly tipping me over the edge into transitioning. Aside from that, I think it would have really affected my personality. Detrans female, I probably would have gone through the painfully awkward pre-teen years of female puberty and growing up, hopeful eventually realizing that I wasn't the only one who felt awkward and uncomfortable. When I think back to the age I chose to transition, I felt like I wanted to claw myself out of my skin. But there's lots of reasons for that. If I hadn't been convinced it was due to me being trans, I would have learned a lot sooner that tons of people feel that way and suffering, existential crisis is just part of life. Detrans female, every single day I wish I was never exposed to transgender content. I would have never identified with it. I wish I understood what my feelings actually meant and how everything was tied with my living situation then too. Desisted, I always thought I thought like a guy due to sexist ideas and being different. But if it weren't for YouTube and Tumblr, then no, I would have never thought I was trans. But at the same time, it's not just an internet thing. People in person were telling me you feel your gender, which planted the seed pretty young in me that I was at least non-binary if not more. That set a foundation for thinking I was a man later for sure. Questioned a while but did not end up transitioning. I only questioned myself after a stint with a rough relationship and got support online from NB communities. I never questioned myself otherwise. I always felt like just a tomboy, but the e-girl culture got to me over that period of a few months. The issue is like hyper-validation. Some spaces validate you regardless of any background circumstances. Not every single person there, much like myself, is certain of their decisions. That's why validation was important to me. Being chronically invalidated my entire life by abusive people, it was addicting to find a community who would validate my life. I had to come out of the funk to really validate myself once again, without people telling me I must be trans because I don't dress like a girl, I don't act like one. Original poster, desisted female. You're so right about the validation thing. It's definitely addictive to be constantly propped up on a pedestal and bowed before, for anyone, but especially for abused and neglected youth. It felt empowering, in a twisted way, to have a band of kids who would viciously rip apart anyone who dared to threaten my sacred little identity. Detrans female, I don't think so. No, in retrospect it's very obvious to me that all of my gender dysphoria was just my anorexia and low self-esteem and internalized misogyny. I was suffering, but I wish I knew then like I know now that pretending to be a boy isn't going to solve all my problems and make me happy. Detrans male, no. But my life was a problem in search of a solution. My self-esteem was near zero when I began considering that I might be a woman. A more interesting question for me is, without the narratives that blame, particularly white and Christian, men for all of the evil in the world, would I have so hated and feared being a man in the first place? Original poster, desisted female. Wow, you posted a really valuable follow-up question. It really seems like a lot of MTF people are just repulsed by all of these awful things projected onto men in our generation. Desisted female. I would 100% have been a tomboy just coming to terms with WLW attraction had I not been convinced by the internet that I was a man in a woman's body. I grieve who I could have been in high school, but I'm so glad I woke up and now I can be who I really am going forward into college and the rest of my life. Detrans male. No, I would not have. Deleted user. I think that I would have settled into being a gay guy and / or feminine man, which is what's happening with me right now after starting my detransition. I think I felt like I was trapped into a role of having to become a super masculine man when it didn't fit me, and becoming a woman seemed like the only way to escape that. Detrans. I was never exposed to that. I transitioned such a long time ago and the transgender community was very different back then. So, in my case the answer is no. If I had never heard of the possibility of transition, I probably wouldn't have thought I was a man though. Information about FTM transition back then was very scarce, but I was able to find it. I don't see that as a problem. The real problem was not being able to imagine someone like me could actually be a woman. The society didn't really support that idea and still don't. Detrans female. I don't think it would have crossed my mind if my sister hadn't brought home library books about trans people when I was in middle school. Detrans female. It's hard to say. But considering I used to look at the brutal surgical pictures of phalloplasty as a teen and would think, yeah, I need that, it feels doubtful that even without all the glorification I wouldn't have been attracted to the idea of transitioning. It really had its hooks in my brain. I do believe that therapy, not affirmation-only therapy, would have helped me immensely. I wasn't required any mental health visits prior to starting testosterone in my teens. I really think it would have been what slammed the brakes for me. Detrans male. I think so. Some of my earliest memories involve wanting to be female, and I latched onto the transgender label from my first exposure to the concept. I didn't really need anyone pushing me in that direction. It's hard for me to say when I would have ever properly identified my feelings as trauma, if ever. Honestly, I feel like I was on an extremely negative trajectory pre-trans, and it's hard to imagine a universe where things got better for me, even if I didn't transition. Detrans male. Nope. I never wanted to transition until I learned it was an option and how it made people happy. Next post, titled, Noon should transition as a solution to being suicidal, questioning own gender transition. I don't think that if I don't transition, I will kill myself convinces anyone that this is a good decision for you. I am still currently living as a trans man. I had top surgery years ago. I don't regret transition, but at the same time, I wish I had waited and sorted out all my self-loathing and extreme self-consciousness / anxiety first. It shouldn't have been a decision out of desperation. I felt pressured to, because if you're trans you should want this, but I wasn't ready. I wish I had felt the self-confidence / acceptance to have had sex in my natural body before hormones and surgery, to feel what it would have felt to have sex with my own breasts. I have done lots of self-searching and love who I am now, but I don't know what my life would look like if I did the mental health journey I have done now, before transitioning. Would I have felt peace in my unaltered body? Maybe, maybe not. But I'll never know, because I was a mentally unwell 18-year-old. Sometimes I feel like the trans community is baiting mentally unwell teens that have no grasp of why they feel so terrible about themselves, trauma-induced or genetic mental health issues most frequently, and telling them that they are trans. That they have to fix their bodies and not their minds. From the comments, detrans female. Honestly, for some it really comes off as an entitled tantrum. I could just as easily claim suicidal intent if I don't get any cake at a party. Some tough love and therapy is really needed. Detrans female. Surprisingly, I was not suicidal before I began transition. I definitely had depression and a lot of anxiety, but didn't feel suicidal. The doctors warned my dad though, when I was 13, that if he didn't let me transition, I would kill myself. It was only after I started T that I had major social issues / impulsive issues. I was probably hospitalized 4+ times from the age of 14 to 18 years old. Once I got off T, even though I still had depression, I didn't feel suicidal. So, I leveled out. Questioned a while but did not end up transitioning. People need to share the real effects more of hormone therapies like this instead of like voice changes and bottom growth or sexual libido, etc. Like how hormones really can change your entire personality beyond just your body. I never took hormones, but I have natural hormonal issues that prevented me from doing so. I believe I would have ended up in jail on testosterone because of the rage I feel during my own natural testosterone fluctuations. I know plenty of people have said they got way more depressed/angry/volatile on Detrans female. They share the effects, most, they just downplay them in interest of the transition. My doctor told me when I told her I was going to transition that I shouldn't let my concerns about my health get in the way of being on testosterone, that everything in life has risks but that testosterone outweighed the risks because it would help bring me to my authentic self/etc. etc. This wasn't even a gender doctor, this was my PCP. Desisted male. Yeah, as someone who's been to rock bottom before, being that depressed can really warp your perspective on things and make you more impulsive than you would be if you're in a better place mentally. Desisted female. If you don't let these kids transition, they'll kill themselves is a potent leftist tool of emotional blackmail. Coupled with a novel affinity for mental health awareness, this is the ultimate threat used to make parents comply with the gender phenomenon and the medical industrial complex which profits from it. Transgender advocates give parents the ultimatum of transition or a death sentence. Suicidal children should be immediately and primarily treated for suicidal ideation. Full stop. No matter what the cause. Advocates will interject here and claim that the inability to transition is causing the suicidally, when in reality, the desire to perceived need for transition is what harms the child and drives her to suicidally. That desire is what should be treated and cured. Let's treat it just like all the other forms of plastic surgery. Does your daughter say she'll kill herself if you don't let her go under the knife to fix her ugly face? Do you take her to the plastic surgeon? No, you don't, because the face was never the problem, her preoccupation with her self-loathing was. Detrans male. This narrative is really so unethical. It's well known that people are vulnerable to suggestion when it comes to suicide. Perpetuating the idea that if you're trans you must transition, otherwise you will be suicidal is only exacerbating the problem and demonstrates that these so-called activists couldn't care less about the lives of trans people. Desisted. And it doesn't even help, the oft-quoted study that suggested 50% of people who don't transition will kill themselves is bunk. It was an online study in 2018 that only asked people if they felt suicidal. Now, I don't know about you, but I think asking a bunch of teens on the internet if they felt suicidal is not a good measure for who is actually going to bite the bullet. It's pretty BS and it hurts a lot of people, forcing well-intentioned folks to encourage kids to take life-altering steps towards assuming another identity, often during some of the most formative years of their life. Socially Trans, Regrets Medical Transition. Skeptic magazine did an incredible series of extremely thoroughly cited pieces on trans issues, and they included every single trans study to date. None provide meaningful definitive data, and the outcomes of replication have not indicated the initial results everyone bandies about hold up. We are on a sinking ship. It's horses all the way down. The backlash from this is going to be unfathomable. Mohit's note, I believe they are referring to this article linked in the description. Desisted. I remember reading that the suicide rate increases 10x after transition, is that true? If I'm not mistaken, it was rebuttal to the claim, suicide rates decrease after, and that the reason this was misleading is because it only looked for the stats a short while after the transition, while in the long run it's actually the opposite. I'll look for the source. Original poster, questioning own gender transition. I am not sure of any studies, but in my life, I have noticed that there is an incredible amount of trans people who suffer in silence after starting transition for fear of being seen as less trans. Because transition obviously isn't a cure-all solution for mental health and people will put on a fake smile, I can see mental health getting worse. Some of the strongest transgender people I know who have been on HRT for over 7 years have killed themselves. Often after having bottom surgery complications, but that's another post. At some point you have to admit you are mentally ill and need more help than HRT and surgery will provide. Socially Trans, Regrets Medical Transition. Transition can change your life circumstances such that you gain ground on your mental illnesses, but the brain has a ton of sex hormone receptors on it, and it varies tremendously from individual to individual. And yeah, I was a huge proponent of well-researched lower surgery until I had it, had absolutely no complications and near perfect results, and realized that not only did it not fix a damn thing, it actually changed my body plan such that my brain must now remap its understanding of my genitals. There is no magical trans brain, just a brain that knows the body it's wired to, and now the issues with my sexuality that led me here are still present, but I have a completely messed up somatosensory map to work through. Desisted female. What you mentioned about having sex in your pre-transition body resonated with me. I always struggle to put it in words because it sounds shallow, but having sex and loving partners was a big factor in me desisting. It helped me come to terms with my attraction towards women, my perceived lack of femininity, and my confidence. Starting my sexual life changed my view on my body and helped my dysphoria more than anything else. I was disgusted with my body because my sexuality intimidated me and made me feel vulnerable. Original poster, questioning own gender transition. That is very similar to my experience. Having loving and accepting partners helped me to realize my body deserves acceptance and is a good body. The notion someone else can love and appreciate my body helped me to stop shielding myself from being viewed in a sexual way. I was scared of sexuality and rejection. Scared someone would see my body and feel disgust. Now I realize that doesn't happen if the person loves you, and if they are disgusted, then I find someone better. Desisted female. Yeah, I struggled with the hypersexualized view of women. It made me feel like I was up for consumption. Like my body was a target and my sexuality was weakness. I was also able to stop shielding myself from my own sexuality once intimacy made it more significant than just a weakness. This video's last post, titled, "Be honest, do you think that a man could be a woman, or a woman could be a man? Do you think that people are born in the wrong body?" Questioning own gender transition. This is not a hate on the transgender community or the detrans community. You do or don't have to answer this. From the comments. Detrans female. I don't think you can be born in the wrong body because life just is. Maybe I'd prefer the life of a cat too, but that's not the life I was given. We are all thrust into a cold, uncaring world and we make the most of what we are given. Some people are born with disfiguring conditions, with an extra arm half formed growing out of the other. There are infants with cancer or heart defects that they won't see past the age of 3. We don't get to choose our bodies, nobody does. And our mind is intimately intertwined with every function of our physical body, so we can't separate the two. The health of both is important together. Desisted. This suggests that there is a second right body that exists somewhere, of which there isn't. There are no species-wide features that differ between a female and a male's brain. Your brain isn't any more gendered than your heart, lungs, or your pinky toe. Gender is a social construct, but your physical sex will always be rooted in tangible reality, with the exception of rare birth abnormalities. There is no changing that, and it is something that is observed at birth, not assigned. You can obviously dress and cosmetically alter your body to achieve a sort of rudimentary facsimile of another sex, but that doesn't make you that thing inherently. I think transition is a radical treatment that should be used as a last option for transsexuals with extreme dysphoria. I believe it to be a brain abnormality akin to disorders such as body integrity identity disorder. I do think transition options, hormone treatments and surgery to healthy organs, should be available to adult people who are suffering, but only after rigorous psychological evaluation and extensive education about what that will mean. I believe the absolute decline of screening processes has created a transmedical industry that many people are profiting off of, and it is specifically targeting youth with experimental treatments. I also think there is a complex myriad of societal ills, widespread generational alienation, sexism, homophobia, religious trauma, pre-existing psychiatric disorders, paraphilias, that result in young people thinking that transition is a smart, safe, and logical option. Desisted. The only reason this doesn't seem insane is because we've been slowly conditioned for decades to accept it. Imagine believing you're born in the wrong body of another race, or animal, you'd be labeled insane. You can relate to a certain culture because maybe you grew up around it, same with relating to the other sex, you can only relate to the feminine or masculine traits, you can't be something you're not. Detrans male. This is a bait thread. These text posts are subtle attempts at getting this place banned or for your username to get added to a list, which will lead you to be harassed by predators or banned outright. They do this everywhere, not just on Reddit. Anything that isn't heckin' valid gets destroyed. Desisted. It's all fine, well and good to play by the rules up until Reddit administrators decide that being detrans itself is problematic and they need no other excuse. We've been sitting around watching the rules change and the rug get pulled out from under entire subs for years now. I'll take that list as a badge of honor till that inevitable day comes. I'm tired of ceding ground. Detrans male. Reddit killed all my hobbyist discussion forums. The internet used to be a place of discovery and independent talent. Now it's sterile, curated bulls, but I am forced to use it if I want to communicate with my hobbies communities. I hate this place, but until it tanks like dig, I will try my best to stay unpermabanned. LOL. Detrans male no desisted. There is no born into the wrong body. We are all in our correct bodies. The idea that someone could be born into the wrong body is an idea that reinforces that there is a correct way to have a body, and that is to align oneself with the gender binary. I am not against transitioning if that's what someone wants to do with their body. But I do not believe anyone ever has or ever will be born into the wrong body. It just doesn't work that way. Desisted female no. I think it's part mental disorder that would benefit by seeing a specialist, and part humanity's need to fit in. People see others claiming to be a different gender and feel as if they need to be special and like them or else, they don't fit in. It's why so many kids claim to have depression and anxiety and the like. Desisted female never, and this lie of being born in the wrong body is based on false arguments without scientific study. The dysphoria is the main problem. Detrans female with a CCSD. A trans man can only ever be a trans man, and a trans woman can only ever be a trans woman. Basically, a male person can only be a boy, man, or trans girl, trans woman or non-binary, and a female person can only be a girl, woman, or trans boy, trans man or non-binary. Detrans male I personally don't believe. Some of human population are prone to fetishes, want to have vagina instead of penis, want to get their legs amputated, etc. Some have personal psychological issues, believe that being a male is something wrong, since they are very feminine, not very masculine to some degree, etc. Then they face the truth, but it's too late very often, post-op. Questioning own gender transition. Who are the people, which are born in the wrong body? Are there then people without bodies? Does it not relate to topics of souls, spirits, etc.? Let's say then, there are souls born in wrong body. Does a soul have sex or gender? These are speculative questions. For the sake of speculation, I don't know if anyone has the correct answer and can prove it. Perhaps, many people, due to some development variations, hormonal variations, feel somehow different from the cultural stereotypes of sex gender. What is expected from each gender varies within cultures and through history. Desisted female yes, but I don't think it's normal that so many people apparently felt like that or isn't linked to anything else. Questioning own gender transition. As far as biological sex, I don't know if it'll ever be possible. As far as one's temperaments, is there such thing as a maternal male or a masculine female? Almost definitely. I think it's delusional to say that transsexualism isn't pointing at a real phenomenon. What is the best thing to be done about those people is something I'm not convinced anyone has any real answers on yet. Scientific research blind to political ideology is the only way anyone can be helped, here or otherwise. Desisted. I think there is a very minute and minuscule percentage, like infinitesimally small, where this will occur. Particularly among those who are born intersex. But that's so ridiculously small. Desisted male. I think people can identify a certain way, but that the priority should be on loving our bodies as they are and understanding that sex is immutable. I also believe it is suffering to develop so much attachment to identity, but I lean more Stoic/Buddhist with regard to human experience, so that's my attempt at nirvana talking. That will be all for this video. Please like and subscribe for more. Thank you for watching and have a nice day. End.